Hello, I'm Cory Burnell, and I'll be your host for this edition of Inside View. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. We have the privilege of being with our district supervisor here in Calaveras County, Dennis Mills. Supervisor Mills, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Cory.
Well, we have an absolute packed agenda here to cover. So there's a lot going on in Calaveras County. So we'll try to get a lot of topics covered for our viewers, and so I'll try to keep them relatively brief, but hey, there's a lot of interesting stuff. So, over in your district, District 4, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yes. Let's talk a little bit about Lake Tullock and the use of the lake and what's going on there.
There's been, over the time that I've been a supervisor, issues regarding the ability to properly support it with marine safety. We have a lot of boat traffic on that lake. It is probably the most heavily used reservoir in Calaveras County. But that coupled with the fire department, and they're having to put paramedics out on the marine safety boats just simply because of the sheer volume that happens there. It's been an ongoing issue, but we're not being supported by Tridam on the costs of providing those services. So we've got to find a way, Bass Lake Plan or something similar to that we could use to financially support getting enough sheriff's deputies out there on that lake to properly handle it.
Well, it's the smallest of the lakes in our area, correct?
It is one of the smallest in the area.
And then we have homes on it, and so there's plenty of boaters there.
It's only one of 5 reservoirs in the western states that has private residences on a federally operated reservoir.
Right, yeah.
The other one I referred to would be Lake of the Ozarks.
Okay.
Would be a parallel.
Yeah.
So that would mean with the docks and all of the other appurtenances that happen as a result.
So consequently, a lot more traffic. It's crowded traffic.
Correct.
I was thinking that financially a solution could be a launching fee, but when people are launching from their own home,
how do you do
really,
that?
You can't do that. Yeah.
And we're very different from Tuolumne County in that they have in their general plan put a buffer around the lake.
Okay.
So that docks on their side of the lake are a whole different scenario than they are on our side. We have over 500 docks on our side.
Wow.
Just to give you an example.
Right.
So it's an ongoing issue, and it's not going to go away anytime soon.
You know, when you talk about the financing of it and not being supported by Tridam, where does the funding for Tridam come from, and how would it be discussed or this problem solved, do you think?
Interesting question. Tridam is a JPA. It's made up of Oakdale Irrigation and South San Joaquin Irrigation districts for the purpose of generating power at Donalds, Beardsley, Tullock, and they have others. But the point is that what they do there is under a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission license, so there are certain restrictions and uses that they are limited to.
Okay.
So that's an ongoing issue that Congressman McClintock sent a letter to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission just this past week questioning why those people down there are not referred to the counties for land use authority and local control. We have the ability to permit docks, to inspect docks, to do all of the necessary things that counties do. We have the codes. We're fully certified to handle the inspection processes. So the question is, if there's people who have issues with what, for instance, Tridam's doing, who's their elected official they go to talk to about it? They don't have one.
Right.
So bring it back into local control.
Okay, so that would essentially kind of be a first step.
A first step.
Yeah,
but it's taken me 4 years to figure this all out. Believe me. There are many of those properties that have no flowage easement, even though they do extend into the reservoir. The properties themselves are under the water, to give you an idea.
Yeah, I had heard that about the properties there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's move on to another topic. If we're talking about lakes, New Melones and the work you've done out there, helping getting grazing rights.
Right.
First, let's talk a little bit about
when
that.
When the Arollas were pushed off of the property, which is now Glory Hole, the federal government was very reticent to want to have private landholders go in there and graze that property. And with the recent fires in California, it kind of woke them up a little bit. So for the first time, I know in 30 years, those grazing permits are now being issued again, and the Bureau of Reclamation has already reached out to said if anybody has any problems in securing a grazing right on land that's adjacent to where they own property, please let them know, and the congressman is more than willing to work with them as well to get that done. So reducing the fuel loads around the lake.
Right.
And the danger that comes from that. As you know, we're in a drought year.
Yeah.
People don't oftentimes think of it being a drought because they're not paying attention to that with COVID and everything else. But the lake level is dropping again. And one of the things that we pushed with Interior Secretary Zinke, who was then the Interior Secretary back a couple of years ago, was a letter to President Trump asking to take the federal water that is stored at New Melones out of the discussion regarding what the state wants to do with it. And he listened to us, and that water is now in a separate issue. And so the contractual obligations that are given to other users in the Central Valley through that project are now able to get water deliveries, which they were not able to get before.
Because the state of California was in the way?
Because the state was in the way wanting the water for fish flows
Right.
and for other releases. That's correct.
Right. The U.S. Constitution gives clear authority over navigable waterways to the federal government. Is
Correct.
that essentially where the federal government has
That's what
jurisdiction?
they've used, yes,
Yeah.
is the waterways clause.
Okay.
Absolutely true.
You said to me that also there had been an inspection of the spillway there out there?
Yes, after Oroville occurred and all of the disaster that went around that, I asked Bureau of Reclamation to be allowed to tour the spillway at New Melones. Is that in the same situation, or is it built differently? What are the design criteria? So they were able to bring us down there along with members from the Copperopolis Fire Department and the media, et cetera, to look the whole situation over. And no, we're safe. So
Yeah.
Copperopolis is not going to risk anything should New Melones top out, so to speak, and have the
Okay.
spillway go into use.
Okay, are there design differences between?
Absolutely.
Okay, what are some of
Yes.
those between?
One of the
that and
differences
Oroville?
is they carved all of the material for the spillway out of serpentine rock. And then they took those carvings, and that's what the dam is.
Okay,
They just swung it around the corner, so
Oh.
to speak. So it's carved into solid bedrock.
Right.
And it's a very long, gently sloping spillway that drops into a creek that comes back to the river. So the possibility of anything happening there, I've got a video that people could look at. It's on YouTube if they're interested in it, to
Okay.
explain it. And from the air, it's quite impressive as to how much cut there is in that area.
yeah, I'm gonna take a look at that. So
Sure.
essentially with being cut out of the rock like that, there just can't be any failure.
There's no potential for failure of the
Yeah.
ground. It's, like I said, it's a very hard rock situation that they were using.
Yeah.
So, and also with the New Melones and the federal government, we've had a number of issues regarding the natural bridges, which is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world on Parrots Ferry Road.
Wow.
And it was so heavily used that at times we're seeing as many as 1,000 people a day walking down to these 3 natural bridges down at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that was an overutilized area. We were seeing human waste, we were seeing garbage parking along the highway, people walking across the 55-mile-an-hour road with blind turns. It really got quite out of hand. So the county the Public Works was very kind to be able to work with the Bureau and put up no parking signs on the east side, but on the west side, it was left to them. So we managed to use the old stagecoach trail from there to get a better access for emergency workers to get
Okay.
down closer to the natural bridges. I physically took our environmental health director down there, and he physically picked up human waste myself to prove the point. But it has been substantially cleaned up, and it is closed right now. And it was closed at the request of the sheriff and with cooperation of Murphy's Fire. They were seeing as many as 14 calls for service down there in since the 1st of January.
Wow.
Which normally 1 or 2 you can understand, but when you have to take 3 fire engines out of service to walk down there to recover somebody or to rescue somebody, it's a monumental task, to say the least. I personally have done it when I was in the fire department there.
Wow.
Murphy's has said, we don't have adequate personnel right now with all of the fires and the strike teams, et cetera, that are going on in the state. And so it will remain closed until at least the middle of October.
Okay.
And at that time, Murphy's Fire will reassess their capacity to properly respond to that area in emergency.
Wow. I had no idea it had that level of traffic.
And one toilet.
I guess, I mean, the word got out, huh, on how
It
great it
got out
is.
through Facebook and other social media.
Yeah.
And I personally, it's like I said, I was down there, so I know these people are not from here.
Yeah.
They were just following the lead from somebody else and
Yeah.
going down there. So-
And it sounds like we have people camping and staying down there, is that?
No, there was no overnight camping.
Okay.
No overnight camping, but it is roughly a 400-foot drop over 1 mile.
Wow.
And so it is, there's edges that are very steep. You don't want to be down there after dark if you're not familiar with the area. Yes, there's snakes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's poison oak. Yes, there's ticks
Yeah.
with Lyme disease and all of this. But it's now, it's kind of in a status quo for the time being until we can get another assessment. We're getting regular discussions with the Bureau
Okay.
as to what we're going to do next.
Sounds like maybe perhaps after fire season, Murphy's may again have personnel this could
That's-
reopen.
That's correct, and we recently repaved Parrots Ferry Road. We repaved Main Street in Vallecito and Angels Road in Vallecito. Now there's roads like O'Byrne's Ferry is scheduled for repaving. You may have heard that the O'Byrne's Ferry Bridge got hit for the 3rd time in 2 years. We're looking at an option there, and I talked with Josh Pack, our Public Works Director, about the possibility of putting a stoplight and making it a one-way bridge. And he said, well, maybe we could do this to where only certain scenarios put it into a stoplight situation. So there has to be a way for us to, do we shorten the vehicles? Only 30 feet and under vehicles are allowed on the bridge, what do we do? So he's looking it all over right now. We have another bridge that was washed out in 2006
Yeah.
in Diamond 20 that's been topped out. They're getting ready to do the finishing touches on it at Stagecoach.
Okay.
And then there was another bridge that was built last year on the low water crossing up at the upper end of Diamond 20 that was never a bridge, but it's a bridge now for safety purposes. Give those people another way out in an emergency.
Okay.
So
Tremendous amount of infrastructure in the district.
a lot of projects, and there's a lot of projects that will continue even into next year. That's
Wow.
correct.
Well, I mean, on the subject of infrastructure, tell our viewers a little bit about the investments out at the fairgrounds with regard to its sewer.
Yeah, there was an issue that they had been under an NOV, a notice of violation, with the state for quite some time over their inability to handle all of the sewage inflows. So from the Butte Fire, we were able to provide them $1 million of funds for a way to improve what they have. And they've brought those plans forward. Everything is pretty much ready to roll. But that is a staging area for CAL FIRE. It's an emergency evacuation zone, large animal placement out there. There's a lot of reasons for that fairgrounds to be fully functional, and it could have as many as 6,000 people potentially out there at any given time. So we want to be sure that that issue gets resolved for them and for the community as well in emergencies.
Yeah, well, it's important for our folks in our community to understand the fairgrounds is used quite a bit year-round, not just during our fair week, right?
Absolutely not. I know many a night I've spent at the fairground staging for fires.
Yeah.
So it's an important, and also Tuolumne County uses it from time to time.
Oh,
It's
wow.
not just Calaveras,
Yeah,
because of how close it is,
yeah,
proximity.
very, very close, yeah.
So
Well, and then, boy, in your district, Copper has a new post office as well.
opened on Monday.
Oh, it did?
Yes, they were horribly undersized for the amount of people that are down there.
Yeah.
And now with the influx of people that are now living full-time in their second homes around the Copperopolis area, Debbie, who's the postmaster there, she said, this is great to have, this 3,000 square feet plus to use, but
Yeah.
it isn't going to take very long to fill it up. So it's at Town Square now, and it was the post office's decision to move it and where it was to be moved to. All I was trying to do with my effort was find a larger facility or improve the facility to properly handle the volume of people that are there. So it's a big deal. And also Angel City, we have a very small library there.
Yeah.
And so the board just recently approved moving the library to the building that's the old Umpqua Bank that's over there beside Middleton's.
Sure.
And that's another 3,000 square foot location, and we could use as a resiliency center. There's a lot of other uses for it. But that's been something that had been in negotiations for quite some time, that will happen here fairly soon. So,
Okay.
Angels Camp is going to get a new library.
Okay, well, that's exciting news
Sure.
too. Yeah, well, one thing I, was thinking about with regard to use of the fairgrounds of late, this year we've been having OptumServe do our COVID testing out there. You know, that's going to be leaving, I heard, and going
Right,
over to
it's going-
Tuolumne. When does that happen?
Majority of the people who were being tested there were from Tuolumne County anyway.
Okay,
So they were saying, look, if it's not something that, we're utilizing in Calaveras, we'd like to look to bring it over here. Now, as things are tapering down, is it a good location? It depends on how many tests you're doing in a given day to make it financially worthwhile to have that spot
yeah.
there.
Now, were we able to fund that with CARES Act money that the county received earlier this year? Was that, how was that
It
site
is
being
part of
funded?
it. It is part of
Yeah.
it. There was $4.6 million of CARES, $4.59 million of CARES Act money that was provided to us, and in our latest budget, we did divvy it out into the various departments that had used it or will be using it here in the near future.
Yeah. Now, recently, the board in the last meeting had an update from Dr. Kaleda about the metrics that go along with COVID testing to determine what level of openness our county's businesses
Right.
can be. So for our viewers, as I understand that, that's a number of positive tests per 100,000 population. And do you know what that threshold is that we can't exceed?
I'm not going to misspeak the number, but I will tell you that we have moved up.
Okay.
And so now businesses that were, restaurants for instance, that were 25% filled
Okay.
can now go to 50% filled.
Okay, so
As
we're
an
improving
example.
in that metric.
We are very much improving. We only have 8 active cases in Calaveras County. We had 8 active cases last week in Calaveras County. So the number of I'm not so interested in the number of positive cases and tests performed, because you could have one person being tested multiple times.
Right.
And the discussion with the board had to do also with, when you're talking about Avalon, who gets counted? What county do they get counted against? Well, their point was, if they're contracted here in Calaveras, we take the count. But at the same time, if it's somebody that's not in a healthcare facility and they contract it, it belongs to the county.
Yeah, meaning if somebody who lives here works in, say, San Joaquin, they contract it there, they get counted toward Calaveras.
That's correct.
Right, which much of our county works outside of the county,
They
particularly
do.
in the Valley Springs end of the county,
Mhm.
and Copper.
And you notice the hot spots are actually Valley Springs, San Andreas, and mostly San Andreas has to do with Avalon. And I talked about the hot spots. Let's identify where the hot spots are and get in front of it and know what we need to do to control that and not wait for it to hit us.
Yeah, the concern from businesses in the community is that, okay, if we're not hitting these metrics, we could go backwards to lower capacity or more constraints on the businesses, right? So
That's correct.
it's imperative that the county be looking at how do we continue down this path of low positivity rates, low number of positive tests, so we
Well,
can
that,
say,
Cory, that was one of my issues, is
Yeah.
it had to do with the businesses were being told that they had to comply with certain things. You needed hand sanitizer, you needed face masks, you needed all of these things in order to have your business open and functional. But the point is, who paid for it?
the
The
businesses.
government didn't do it,
Yeah,
but government was mandating it.
right.
I have a problem with that. If we're going to tell a private business to do something and they're already struggling to make ends meet, they're struggling to find, where do we put our kids so we can work? And now that they're being homeschooled, some of them are being homeschooled, now you've got, you're gonna go back to a single wage earner in that family. That's another problem
Yeah,
that these
absolutely.
families are facing right now.
Yeah.
So businesses are going to continue to struggle for some time. It is not something that's just going to simply just open the door and everything's okay again.
Right, now the next level, I think these are color coded or,
Yes.
okay, so where are we at, red or something
No,
like that?
we're at orange.
We're orange, and then the best is what, yellow, right?
Yellow.
There is no green, right?
No.
So
Isn't that strange?
Yeah,
There may be after the election.
right, November 4th, we have a green option, but So, all right, so to move to yellow, which then I imagine is that 100% capacity or is it 75%?
75.
So there is no 100% capacity
No.
on the, okay. There's positivity rates, meaning when the number of tests that show up positive out of the number of tests taken.
Well,
Right?
we have to have so many tests taken per
Right.
week as well, or per day.
Right, which may, I mean, with people taking tests more than once, I guess that helps get us to that
That
number.
helps get us to that.
Right.
Now you're figuring out the numbers.
Yeah, so folks,
crunch.
if you're healthy, get out there and get tested multiple times, right? Help
Actually, it
make
may
that
help.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, what is the recovery rate for
Well,
people under the age
Oh,
of
it's-
19?
it's 99.9 some
99,
percent.
yeah,
I mean,
crazy.
for people under 50, it's all like 99%.
So in
recovery
other
rate.
words, if you think about people who are already somewhat immunocompromised, they have a higher likelihood of already having a pre-existing condition, which would help to contribute to.
Right.
There's a lot of other factors here. If we just start looking at numbers and numbers only, we don't really think about what drives those numbers.
Well, we know that with the state's positivity rate on these PCR tests, if those tests are overly sensitive, we will have a higher positivity rate and we'll go from orange to red, or what's the worst, purple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
so-
we're back to,
So I think it's imperative that the county maybe take a look at how sensitive these tests are, because the New York Times a couple weeks ago ran an article saying that these cycle thresholds in these PCR tests are too sensitive and we're getting more positives than we actually should be getting.
if you go back to the second meeting that there was a report out on our situation in the county, I questioned that.
Okay,
It's on the tape,
okay.
and I was questioning the accuracy of the data. I'm not going to be one that'll just without question believe what somebody's telling me. I've got to be able to sort it out for myself.
Right,
And I saw a lot of fear being driven. As long as you keep saying, well, there was 300 plus cases in Calaveras County. Yeah, but there's only 8 active. Where are those 8 active, and how do I keep myself from becoming active? I have to find a way to stay away from those that are active.
yeah.
And then they talk about asymptomatic. Well, that could also be driven by high sensitivity again.
Well, that's the concern I'm raising, is that if positivity rates in these tests can send us back to red or purple as a county, possibly red, I would guess purple, you probably have to have ICU cases and that type of stuff.
Which we don't have right now.
Yeah.
We still have 30 beds sitting over there at Calaveras High.
Sure, yeah, I'm forgiving in that at the time in March, as we made those plans, we really didn't know how
Right.
serious this
But as
was.
it's panned out,
Right, we know a heck of a lot more
Right.
about the data today. So with the OptumServe site, does our county have any say over the tests that are used there and their sensitivity
No.
ratings? We
No.
haven't. So where does that come from? Sacramento?
Yeah, that's the state.
Okay, so in order to hit these state numbers, we got to be using the state's tests.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's outside our control, essentially.
I hear you thinking.
Yeah,
how this is all-
you hear the rocks rumbling around in
I
my
do.
head, huh?
I do, because they rumble around in my mind when it comes to that.
Well, let's talk about something then that's a little bit more fun then
All right.
than COVID. How about the fire districts and this $250,000 of Butte money, and how
Yeah, you
they're going to
recall-
put that to work?
You recall that we had allocated $250,000 to each one of the fire districts, including the City of Angels Camp, that as long as it was related to non-payroll, to improve their fire service, that they could use it to spend whatever way they want. And a lot of them went out and bought new Type 3s, which are now out doing strike team assignments in other parts of California. Others have upgraded equipment. And so it has helped them tremendously in how they're able to deliver their service in the rest of the county.
Yeah.
Not everyone as a voter is going to be willing to want to take on additional debt, as you found out with San Andreas and West Point. They didn't get the 2/3 they needed.
Yeah.
And so we can't rely on that. But during my time in office, we did get a certain portion of the Prop 172 money and 25% of the TOT, the transit occupancy tax, that is now being diverted over to the fire districts to help offset some of their additional costs. It's not a lot, but it's something to help balance that. As you know, we're now working towards another ambulance contract.
Yeah,
And
yeah, let's talk about that too.
I'm the alternate on the Mountain Valley EMS board. So that has been an ongoing issue where the fire districts have suggested that they would like to try to bid on the contract this time around, and that they feel that they could not so much do a better job, they can provide the services currently being provided, but it's up to them to decide how they're going to make that work. We're not going to have any real say in that.
Okay.
But it may change the dynamic of the bid itself as to what other people might be involved. And so just kind of stay tuned, because
Yeah. How do you think that would impact service for people in the community?
Evans Pass has been doing it now for years.
Okay.
Copper has everything except transport.
Okay.
So they have a paramedic, and it's part of what they did was a Measure C years ago. So there is fire districts currently doing it here. It's just a matter of, can it be done countywide by the rest of the fire districts? How? So they have a JPA now, that's up first.
Okay.
I can remember years ago, these fire districts wouldn't talk to each other. It was an automatic fight. But they're now a JPA and they're talking to each other and they're trying to figure out how they can do this jointly. And because you think about Central Fire or West Point or McCollum Hill, how are they gonna do it with the number of personnel they already have?
Yeah.
So it becomes a struggle for the smaller districts that don't have any real finances as to how they would perform the service. Do they look at a different scenario to make it happen? There's just a lot of discussion has to go forward with it. I hope that they can provide a good bid,
Yeah.
but whether or not, what it's going to take to carry it out, I know that the county has already agreed to sticking some seed money into it. And so there's roughly $1.5 million that we've committed, should they win the contract,
Okay.
to helping them get it off the ground, with an understanding they would pay it back with interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that creates heartburn for people,
Mhm.
but the point is that they just don't have the funding necessary to stand up a fully functional ALS system
Yeah.
on a moment's notice. They're not going to need to until probably March or April if they do win. So
Okay.
there will be a time window for them to work out those details.
Okay. Now, and if they don't succeed in their pursuit, just for sake of contrasting, what do services look like? Just what we currently experience?
It would be
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, the contract itself that we're looking for, the proposal we're looking for, is pretty much status quo. We did give back some certain amount of time and locations as a way of softening it a little bit. It wasn't comfortable because we didn't get any bidders the first time around.
No.
And so hopefully now we'll have some interest through the current contract that the proposal, and we'll see where it goes. But no, we'll still have ambulance service in Calaveras County.
Right.
Believe me, that's
Wanted to be
not
clear for our
Yeah,
viewers,
that's not
because
gonna
it's
go
not all
away.
hinging on this.
No, no.
Well, Dennis, we have run out of time, because you and I could probably
you
spend
can't.
2 or 3 hours together here
Yes,
talking
thank you.
about all these issues. So,
Yeah.
so Supervisor Mills, thank you very much for joining us on Inside View. And to our viewers, thank you for spending some time with us, and we hope you found the information useful. Hope to see you next time.